Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Got the other DBXL up here on the workbench tonight. This is a bone stock DBXL I traded for a few months ago. It's in really good shape. I did plan on leaving it completely stock so when people came over they could drive this thing if they wanted to. But I got a really good deal on this XLX2 combo. It was like $380 shipped through Tower Hobbies, so I had to grab that. This one does have the 800 kV motor, so we're gonna throw that in there and do some testing against our other DBXL with the 1100 kV motor. I will throw the same gearing on there and the same tires just so we can get kind of a real accurate test between the two. Pretty sure the 1100 kV is going to be a little bit faster. It does have the higher RPM range. But yeah, we're going to get that in there and get a good test on video for you guys. So let's check out what we got going on here. XLX2 combo with 800 kV motor. Some server fans we're going to throw on there with the Alza fan mount. Going to put that on X-Max heatsink. Also going to upgrade the ESC fan, and we're going to wire this into the fan harness so it still turns on with the thermostat that's built into the ESC. I'm not sure if everyone knows this, a lot of people probably do, but Castle ESC fans, they don't run constantly like other ESC fans do. They only turn on when the ESC gets hot enough, and then they turn back off once it cools down. So we're just going to throw a little bit more powerful one on there, a little bit bigger, move some more air, just so it can get this job done a little bit faster. Also, we're going to use this, I think it's Extreme Racing, makes this carbon fiber ESC plate. I will put a link in the description for these. All the parts for these cars sell out so fast. So I do apologize to you guys if I put links in the description for these parts and they're not in stock. Just be patient. They'll come back in stock pretty quick. A lot of this stuff restocks pretty quick, so just be a little bit patient. It's real popular. This car is super popular right now, so parts are very limited. Get them while you can. All right, let's get started. Okay, let's get started. The tools we're going to use, I'm going to use a 1/4 inch impact driver. It's basically a power screwdriver that has low and high torque settings, so I'm going to be using that. Most of the center diff and motor mount screws are 2.5 millimeter button head screws. There might be 1 or 2 2.0 millimeter button head screws. So let's get these out real quick. Really, you can do this in like 5 or 10 minutes. This car is one of the easiest vehicles I've ever worked on, and it's super easy to take apart. So let's get started. All right, got a little magnetic tray for our screws. Gonna hit these ESC bolts. I'm just gonna take all these screws out of here, and there they go. So it's all good. Do need to cut that zip tie off there. Let me see what we got here. This might work. There we go. Okay, got that ESC loose now. You know, let's unplug it from the receiver. Man, that thing's on there tight. Okay. Another benefit of working on this car, easy access to the receiver. Looks like they threw another zip tie on there. So we'll clip that guy off real quick. Looks like it didn't get all the way through it. Okay. Gonna unplug this orange and black wire. 1 orange, 2 black. Let's get that zip tie out of the way. So it should be in the throttle spot or number 2 on your receiver. Get that unplugged. Okay. Motor wires unplugged. We need to remove the battery cable holders. Those ones I'm pretty sure are 2 millimeter. Nope, I was wrong. Oh, just kidding. I had the right one. Yes. So those are 2 millimeter button head screws on there. Get those out. AC wires are free. Oh, missed one more. Okay. All right, now there's one more screw. There's a long one on the hinge part of it. Need to get that guy off real quick. Gonna flop this back. So that's also a 2mm. Okay. There you have it. ESC is off. So the 2mm screw goes right to the back there. It's on like a hinge. You can fold it just like you can the body. There's the screw. Pretty long screw. So I'm just throw that in our parts tray. We're not going to be reusing this normally. I just drill out the stock ESC plate in the same bolt pattern as the bottom of a Max 5 or the XLX, XLX2 ESC, and then I just bolt it right to that. But we're going to be using that nice carbon fiber one, so we'll discard that for now and we'll come back to it later. All right. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and throw this cover back on our receiver box just so I don't have a bunch of spare parts sitting everywhere. If I can, or if I have to leave a build overnight, I usually will stick screws and stuff back in the spot that I took them out from, just so I kind of can remember until I do have it remembered. Eventually you will remember where most of these screws go if you take it apart enough. Okay, so let's get this gear cover off here. It's a 2.0mm button head screw. Well, that's the size for the tool. But the screw itself is not that size. Okay, get the motor mount screws. Look at that, those came off easy. I already had the pinion gear off here, so this makes the job quite a bit quicker. So there's 2 motor mount screws on the top, and there's one on the bottom. Oh, look at that. Looks like the last owner added some fancy screws in here. Check that out. Flathead. Okay, we'll get that fixed. Don't worry. But let's go with this motor. Last screw's in this little slot right here. Boom, boom. So, these are even tight. Wow. I'll flip it back over. Now we can pull the motor out. Okay, next up we got to take the rest of the screws out of the bottom of this motor mount that's also attached to the center diff. So there'll be a few screws on the bottom of this side and then 2 on this side, and then this whole unit will just slide up and out, and the drive shafts will slide out also. So let's do that real quick. Okay, so we're going to take the bottom screws out of the center diff mount and the motor mount. It's this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. So it looks like, was that 5 screws? One of them's already out of mine, but it is that one also. So let's get those real quick. I'm using a 3mm speed hex bit. I would hold it on this last one because it could fall, so I'm holding it from the other side on top. Okay. Got those screws out. Like I said, there's going to be 5 of them, but I already had one of them out. Alright, let's flip the car back up over. Put it on a stand. Okay, so now this should just pull straight up and out. What we're going to do is just lift it straight up. The drive shafts will slide out. And there you have it. We got the center diff and motor mount taken off. And oh, look at that. Screw was loose on this car and it broke off. So the motor mount will slide off over the drive cups. We got a little bit of work to do in this car. I did get this car used. It looks like the maintenance wasn't the greatest. So I'll throw some new bearings on there, put a new screw in there. We'll fix that up. But first off, let's get these apart. It's plastic on that side. Yeah, both these bearings don't feel very good, but I do have some extra bearings, some fast eddies. So we'll go through and replace some bearings on this car while we're doing it. Okay, to take this center diff apart, we gotta take these screws off of both sides. You can actually just do one side really, but I'm gonna take both sides apart and put some new bearings on here, so I will have to unscrew the 4 bolts on both sides so I can get these drive cups off and throw some new bearings on there. And I'm gonna throw some 500K diff fluid in the center of this one. This one screw here looks like it vibrated out and then it hit the side of the motor mount. As it spun, you can see it right there, it chewed it up pretty good, but still reusable, so no big deal. And it just bent the screw, and luckily it didn't mess up the threads. I can still spin it out, it looks like. So we'll get that bent guy out of there, and we'll throw a new screw in there. Yeah, look at that thing, nice and bent. All right, let's get the rest of those out. This one is a 2mm, I'm pretty sure. So go ahead and loosen all those. We'll go from there. Okay, so we'll just continue taking these screws out. None of those were tight. Not very good. And then we'll pull the spur gear off. We'll get inside there. It's got some really thick black grease in there. So I'll get that all cleaned out with some paper towels. What I like to do is just grab the shaft that holds the spider gears on with some needle nose pliers. Just like this. And then I just pull the whole thing out. Usually you can. Okay, we'll just do one gear at a time. So pull that out. That is nasty. Stuff's usually clear, but maybe that's what came in it from the factory. So both sets of spider gears come out. Okay, next up we're going to take apart this other side of the center diff so we can replace this bearing as well. Just going to take these 4 screws out here. That gear right there will also pop off. You can sometimes just set them down and the gear will actually come out of there. I don't know, if you leave it sitting there for a little bit, it may fall off, it may not. But we're not getting lucky with it. So, you can grab that with some needle nose pliers. Boom, there you go. And just pull that guy out. We'll clean that up later. Also, I forgot to mention, underneath these pins is a shim. You want to make sure you don't lose that. There's one on both sides. The one from the other side is right here. So when this goes in, it's going to be under this gear, just like that. So make sure you don't lose those. They're on both sides. But yeah, let's get these screws out of here real quick. Again with the 2.5mm hex bit. Get the screws right there. Also, be a little careful when you're pulling these out, especially if you're using a power tool. If they're really tight, this could jerk in your hand and hurt you, so be careful. I'm noticing that most of the screws on this car are barely tight. That's why I'm not too worried about doing it myself. But yours may be a different story. Okay, got those out of there. Okay, now that we got the 4 screws out of there, this guy will pull apart from here. So just pop that off there like that. We'll set that aside. Get this pin out of here. Throw that in there so we can clean it. Goopy. Okay, again, be careful with the gasket. And there's that shim right on here. Don't lose that. You need to put it right back where it came from. Pull the drive cup off. Discard the old bearing. Clean up everything. And then we'll throw a new bearing on there. So we'll get this cleaned up. And then we'll do some new bearings and we'll start reassembling it. Okay, now that we got the diff The center diff all cleaned up, all the parts cleaned, and all the fluid out of there. I just wiped out with a paper towel. Didn't need to use any chemicals or anything. Got it nice and clean. We're going to start reassembling this though. Throw some new bearings on there. As you can see, these old ones are pretty rusty. Also, I'm going to put some 500K fluid in there. Let's see, I got a bunch of diff fluid down here in my stash. Oop. I got a few more bottles up in the cupboard too. As you can see, I've been hoarding this stuff. But we're going to throw some 500K in the center and probably 100K in the front and leave the rear alone. But let's get started. First off, throw a bearing on here. Grab a drive cup, slide it through there. Make sure you don't push this little rubber O-ring out that's in there. And then take one of your shims, slide it over. Get your pin. Slide that guy back in there just like that. Boom. All right, that half is complete. Okay, next up we're gonna get this half of the diff housing reassembled. So make sure your pin and your shim are on there, and you got the O-ring underneath there that seals this so fluid doesn't leak out. Put this side on the side without the flange so it can go over the edges like this. Set it down. Make sure you put Loctite in all these screws because they will come out if you don't. Got a little too much on there. Put some on the second screw. Okay. Okay, now I am going to tighten them down. We'll do in a cross pattern, so that one, this one, and this one. Anytime you tighten something down that's circular like this, you should always do a crisscross pattern, never just go in a circle. So get those tight. Put a little rag on my hand so I can grip it better. Okay, we're good to go now. And when you do the crisscross, you just do that first, and then afterwards to just double check you're okay to go around in a circle. All right, got that on there like that. This is what it should look like at this point. Nice and clean. You can see our gasket in there. At this point, I'm gonna throw this gear back on here. As you can see, it's slotted on the bottom. You gotta make sure you line that slot up with the pin and it presses down fully. This is crucial, otherwise this won't work right. So a few ways you can do it. You can just set it in there and try and get lucky, or you can put some pliers on it and just try and lower it in there. That's what we're gonna do. So boom. And you'll know it's all the way down when the end of the drive cup is flush with the top of the gear. If it's kind of pushed down still and not flush, then you know it's not all the way down. Okay. Now we're gonna rebuild the spider gears and put those in. Okay, this part you gotta make sure you do correctly. So what we're going to do is first slide the gear on one side, then put a shim on, and then a square washer. So slide the square washer on. It should look like that. Gear, shim, washer. And you're going to do that on both sides. So gear, shim, washer. Okay, we'll set that one aside for now. Do the same thing with the other one. Gear, shim, washer. And you want the gears facing inwards. Oop, got some fuzz or something in there. Okay, got it. Washer. So it should look like that. You can see the gear, the shim, and then the washer in between it. Okay, now you can take this one and you want to line the flat spots up with each other, just like this. Boom. So this is what your spider gears will look like, all set up, just like that. Okay, now we'll grab our housing that already has the gear in it, hold it up like this, and we'll grab the spider gears with some needle nose right down the middle, just like that. And we'll slide them on in there, just like that. You gotta line up, oop, it's all right. You gotta line up the square washers on the ends with the slots in the diff housing. Slide them in there. Make sure that the flat shafts cross each other and give it a spin. Maybe hold it down while you do it just so it doesn't come out. But that's how it should look when it's spinning. Okay? So at this point, you can start adding your fluid. And like I said, we're going to put 500K fluid in here. So we'll get that opened. Okay. And I usually fill it up just above the spider gears, but we'll see how much is in here. Oh, this is what it looks like coming out. The 500K is pretty thick. It's not quite as thick as the traxxas fluid, the 20 million, but it is still thick. Put that in there, let it settle for a minute. Okay, at this point I got most of the bottle in there. I'm just waiting for it to kind of settle. Don't spin it too much at first. Let it settle because this can make the gears pop out of place and you don't want that. So make sure it settles in there real good and then you can start spinning it. Okay, now that the center diff housing is full of fluid, we'll start with the other side. I put my other new bearing on here, slid the drive cup through, put my shims on, and threw the pin through there. So do it in that order. Okay. Take this gear. This slides right on here just like the other side. Make sure you line the pin up with the slots in the back of the gear. Now take this and just line up the holes. You might have to spin the gear around to line up the holes because the square, I think, isn't the same on both sides. So you gotta find which holes line up, which it looks like right there. So as you can see, some of these holes won't line up. and the other ones will. So just make sure you line those up. And then we'll do the same thing with the screws. Snug that one up. Grab the next one. A little bit of Loctite. Snug. Nope, too much. Okay, last one. Okay. Got all 4 screws in there. We're gonna torque them down some. Crisscross pattern always. I put some muscle into it, so make sure they're tight. Hit them one last time. All right, there you have it. Center diff, new bearings, 500K fluid installed. Give it a spin. Check it out. All right, next step, here we go. Okay, first off, I'm going to shorten these wires some, and then we're going to pre-tin them. So I'm probably going to cut a little over 1 inch off each one. I don't need them that long. Make sure you get them the same length. Okay. So something like that looks good. We're going to put a wire between the two. But first, you got to strip the ends of these. Just using some basic wire strippers. Cut a little bit extra off, but it's alright. Then I wind them up like that. And there's the cat. Okay, as for length, when we strip these, you want it to be so it bottoms out in the plug, and there's just a little bit, maybe just a little bit over, so you don't melt the heat shrink when you solder it. So something like that's like perfect. That's what we're looking for. Okay, so we'll do that. And then I'm going to pre-tin it. So I'm going to put it in my wire clamp. Okay, so I got my soldering iron on. I'm just going to turn it up to like 800. One tip is always keep your soldering iron clean. So I got like a little sponge here that I wipe it on, and I have a little magnetic cleaning thing that I can use right there for my tip. So you always want to keep it clean in between solder. You get a much cleaner solder joint with that. All right. Okay, now that we got the temp up, we're gonna pre-tin this guy. So we'll warm it up. I'll add some solder. If you watch, the solder is actually gonna suck into the wire. That's what we want. This makes the wire a little bit more solid on the end. Helps you get a nice solid solder joint as well. Alright. That looks good. Okay. So we got that one pre-tinned. Now we're going to do the same thing for the negative side. Okay, so for the negative side, same thing. Clean solder tip. Warm it up some. Make sure my soldering iron's on. Okay, it's on. Get out of here, cat. Jesus. Okay. And then melt some solder on. Let it suck on into the wire. Put too much, it's okay, it'll just fall off. Alright. Okay, now we got both of our wires all pre-tinned. We can start soldering those to the connector. And we'll get this guy set up. This is going to be our center wire when we set this up to run 8S. So we'll cut that down probably a few inches and we'll solder that on. But first off, let's get one of these connectors on here. Okay, so we're going to solder on this male connector. For this part, I recommend taking an old female connector you don't care about. As you can see, this one's been cut off of something else I did a long time ago. So we're going to take that, stick it on here. This way, when you solder it, these connectors, they don't move around inside this housing. This will help kind of keep it in place because they do get pretty hot and they can melt in the housing if you leave it on there too long, and they can move around or even come out. So I do it like this. I put one on there, I clamp it in place on this side, and I usually like to have it tilted up a little bit so the solder can kind of pool down into where we're going to put the plug. So something like that would be perfect. Try and get it a little bit lower. Then we'll take our wire. Stick our wire in here. Let's get this guy a lot lower. Get you out of the way. Okay. We're just going to have it sit in there just like that. So it's pretty much ready to just add solder. Now we'll heat it up and add solder to it. But before you do that, you got to remember, what I didn't remember, is put the wire cover on there. So grab yourself a wire cover, and this is the side that clips into it. So you'll take it and you'll slide it onto your wire before you solder it. Make sure you do that. Slide it on, just leave it like that. Then put the wire back in the clamp and stick it on in there. Okay. Alright, now we're ready to solder. Okay, now that we got the wire pre-tinned, make sure you solder this on correctly. The positive is on the flat side on these QS8 plugs. So make sure you do red on the flat side. It's also labeled on the side plus a negative. But that's one thing to keep in mind when you're doing that. Make sure you get that done right the first time. Okay, now I'm going to take my iron. I'm going to heat up the wire. Take a little bit to warm up. The soldering iron goes into like sleep mode, so sometimes it doesn't turn on right away. Okay. Alright, now that we're nice and hot, we're going to start adding some tin. What you're trying to do is basically fill the connector halfway. Imagine like a pipe cut in half. You just want to fill it up halfway so it kind of pulls around the wire. Okay, now we're going to do the negative side. So we got the plug in place where we want it, wire right where we want it, and make sure you put your wire cover on there before you do this. Otherwise you'll have to desolder it and start over. So, get your gun ready, or your iron I mean. Start heating up that wire. Start adding some solder in there. And we're trying to kind of fill the pipe halfway up. Put a little more solder back in there. Okay, we're all done with that one now. Should look something like that. About half full. Okay. Okay, now we're going to start working on the connector wire that goes between the two plugs. I'm going to pre-tin that one as well. Heat it up a bit. Start adding some solder. Not too much. No worries. Okay, got that done. Okay, our tip. Okay, now we're gonna finish soldering these up. I'll get this all set up in here. Okay, now that we got that heated up, let's add a little bit of tin. Alright, there you go. See if we can get a better picture. So that's kind of what you're looking for. You know, the solder just fills it right up and it's just halfway across. Okay, now that we got that one done, you're going to have to tuck your wire through the wire cover and slide it up some. You don't need to clip it on just yet. Do that, and then tuck it through the other one, And this one, you're going to solder to the positive side of the battery connector. So it's going to go right there, just like that. And then we'll clip all the wire covers on afterwards. So we'll get it all set up. Okay, just like before, get your wire all set up where you want it before you solder it. And then start heating. Get your soldering iron out. Make sure it's turned on. Make sure the tip's clean. Okay, we're going to heat this guy first bit, and then start adding some solder. Okay. Now, depending on your soldering iron, this may take longer or a shorter time to heat up. But you definitely want to make sure you get it hot enough so it actually solders the joint to the connector. Let that sit for a second. Put a little bit more back here. Okay, that should be enough. Let the wire suck up some of it. There you go. That should be good. Let it cool, don't blow on it. And that's it. Next we'll slide the connectors on and then we're done. Alright, there you have it. This is pretty much what you're looking for. You know, you want the connector sort of half full and the solder just filled around it on both sides. A better shot for you there. But that should be perfect. Might be a little bit flex paste left on there I need to clean off, but other than that, this should be good. And while I slide these wire covers on here, they clip in place, so no need for shrink wrap or anything. And that's it. We'll get it back in the buggy and we'll do some test runs on it. Alright guys, there you have it. Got the OSE8 plugs on here. We're ready to go. Make sure you put the male connectors on there and make sure you get them in the right spots. They are labeled positive, negative on there. And make sure you put the wire covers on before you finish the last solders. But there it is. Alright.